I was 28 when this happened, and it took place on Christmas Eve while I was driving alone across state lines to visit my parents. The trip was supposed to take 5 hours, but a delayed departure and worsening weather turned it into something much longer. By the time it was fully dark, my eyes were burning, and my body felt heavy with exhaustion. I had been gripping the steering wheel for too long, telling myself I could push through, that I didn't want to waste money on a motel for just a few hours of sleep. Around 9:30 p.m., my GPS recalculated again and suggested a small roadside exit I barely recognized. Gas was low. My phone battery was under 30%. I took the exit. The road narrowed immediately, headlights carving through darkness that felt thicker than it should have been. After a few minutes, a flickering sign appeared on the right: motel vacancy. One of the letters buzzed faintly, cutting in and out. I slowed down, hesitating. The place looked old, cheap, the kind of motel people only stopped at because they had no better option. That night, I didn't. I pulled in. The parking lot was mostly empty. A few cars sat scattered far apart, their windows dark, no interior lights, no movement. The building itself was long and flat, a single story stretching back into darkness. Half the exterior lights were out. The others glowed weakly, casting uneven shadows across the cracked pavement. I parked near the office and sat there for a moment, engine running, listening. No voices, no TVs, no doors opening or closing, just the hum of my car and the distant sound of traffic from the highway. I turned the engine off and stepped out, the cold air biting into my skin. The office door was unlocked. A bell hung from the handle. I stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of old carpet and cleaning chemicals. The front desk was empty. A computer monitor sat dark behind the counter. Keys hung on a pegboard, but several hooks were empty, suggesting other guests were checked in. I waited, clearing my throat softly. Hello? No answer. I rang the bell. The sound echoed too loudly in the small room. Still nothing. I glanced toward the hallway behind the desk, expecting someone to appear, but it remained dark and silent. A handwritten sign on the counter read, "Back in a minute." It didn't look new. The edges were curled. I waited. A minute passed, then 2. My unease grew, but I was too tired to leave. I rang the bell again, louder this time. Finally, I heard movement. Footsteps, slow dragging slightly. A man emerged from the hallway behind the desk. He was older, maybe late 50s, his face pale under the fluorescent light. He didn't smile, didn't greet me. He just stared for a moment like he was trying to place me. "Checking in," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. He nodded once and slid a clipboard across the counter without a word. As I filled out the form, I noticed his eyes never left me. Not in a curious way, in a flat, assessing way that made my skin crawl. When I handed the clipboard back, he took it, glanced at it briefly, then reached under the counter and produced a key. No envelope, no receipt, just the key. "Room 12, he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it much. I asked what time checkout was. He didn't answer right away, just stared again. "Then morning," he said. I took the key and thanked him, but he was already turning away, disappearing back down the hallway. I stepped outside and immediately felt exposed. The parking lot seemed darker now. The flickering sign buzzed again. I walked quickly to room 12, my boots crunching softly on gravel. The door was at the far end of the building, partially hidden where one of the exterior lights had burned out completely. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, locking it behind me. The room was small, but clean enough. Bed, dresser, bathroom, a single window facing the parking lot. I dropped my bag and turned on the lamp. The light flickered once, then steadied. I exhaled slowly, telling myself I was being paranoid. It was just a cheap motel, that was all. I pulled the curtains closed, then paused. Something outside caught my eye. I opened them just a crack. In the reflection of the glass, I could see part of the parking lot. One of the cars had its headlights on now. I was sure they'd been off before. I watched for a few seconds. The headlights stayed on, unmoving, illuminating, nothing in particular. I closed the curtain again and sat on the bed, plugging my phone into the wall. No service. The signal icon showed nothing but an empty outline. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the heater. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate. They stopped in front of my door. I held my breath. A shadow passed beneath the doorframe, blocking the hallway light briefly. Then it moved on. I waited until my heart slowed before standing up again. I told myself it was another guest, someone walking to their room. That was all. I turned off the lamp and lay down, exhaustion finally pulling at me. Just as I closed my eyes, there was a soft knock on the door. Not loud, not urgent, polite. I sat up instantly, heart racing. "Front desk," a voice said quietly from the other side. It didn't sound like the man from earlier. It sounded younger. I didn't move. The knock came again. "Miss, there's an issue with your room." I stayed silent, staring at the door, every instinct screaming at me not to answer. The voice waited a moment longer, then spoke again, softer this time. "I can see your light was on." My blood ran cold. The lamp was off. I hadn't turned it back on. The hallway outside fell silent. I didn't hear footsteps leaving. I didn't hear a door open or close. I only realized how tightly I was gripping the sheets when my hands started to ache. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up despite having no service. A notification appeared from an unknown number. Just one line of text. "You shouldn't sleep with the curtains open." I stared at the message on my phone until the screen dimmed. "You shouldn't sleep with the curtains open." My heart pounded so loudly I was sure whoever stood outside could hear it. I hadn't opened the curtains. I was certain of that. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, eyes locked on the thin line of darkness beneath the door. I waited for footsteps, for a knock, for anything that would explain how someone knew what was happening inside my room. Nothing came. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. I forced myself to stand and check the window. With shaking fingers, I pulled the curtain back, just enough to see outside. The parking lot lay mostly empty under weak yellow lights. The car with the headlights on earlier was still there, engine idling facing the building. I couldn't see inside it. The glare reflected off the glass, hiding whoever sat behind the wheel. I let the curtain fall closed and locked it tight against the frame. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "You're shaking." A wave of panic washed over me. I typed back before I could stop myself. "Who are you?" The 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. "You checked in late," the reply finally came. I felt my stomach drop. That wasn't something a stranger should know. I checked the door lock again, then slid the chair from the small table in front of it, wedging it under the handle. The heater kicked on, blowing warm air, but my skin felt ice cold. I sat back on the bed, clutching my phone, every sense stretched to its limit. Footsteps echoed outside again. This time they didn't pass my door. They stopped. I watched the shadow creep under the door, stretching and shrinking as someone shifted their weight. A hand brushed the handle, lightly testing it. The chair rattled. I bit down on my sleeve to keep from screaming. "Front desk," the voice said again, closer now. "Too close. We need to move you to a different room." I didn't answer. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. Silence followed. Long, heavy silence. The footsteps retreated slowly. I waited, counting seconds, then minutes. My phone buzzed once more. "Wrong choice," the message read. That's when the knock came at the window. Soft at first, then again harder. I froze, staring at the curtain. The knock repeated slower, deliberate, like someone tapping to get my attention. I didn't move. The tapping stopped. A shadow rose against the curtain, tall and unmistakably human. It leaned closer until I could see the faint outline of a head and shoulders through the thin fabric. A voice spoke from inches away, muffled by glass. "I just want to talk." I scrambled backward off the bed, my heel catching the edge of the rug. The shadow remained there, unmoving as if waiting. Then slowly it stepped away. I listened as footsteps crunched across gravel. A car door opened, closed. The engine revved slightly. Headlights swept across my window, then turned off. The engine idled. I didn't know how long I sat there shaking before the silence broke again. This time it was a knock at the door, louder, more insistent. Miss Amand's voice called out, the same hoarse voice from the front desk. "There's been a complaint." I stood, frozen, tears streaming down my face. About what I asked, my voice barely audible. "Noise," he replied calmly. "Someone reported movement outside your room." I couldn't breathe. I didn't. "We need to inspect the window," he interrupted. The handle rattled again, harder this time. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. "I'm calling the police," I said louder now. There was a pause. Then quietly, "There's no signal out here." The truth of it hit me like a blow. He knew. He stepped away from the door, his footsteps fading. I waited, listening. The heater hummed. The light flickered once. Then my phone buzzed again. A photo appeared on the screen. It was taken from outside my room. The image showed my window, the curtain drawn, and behind it my silhouette, small and hunched against the wall. The caption beneath the photo read, "You should have kept driving." Something snapped inside me. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and yanked the chair away from the door. I flung it open and ran. The hallway lights flickered as I sprinted past empty doors, my boots pounding against concrete. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, sobbing, my hands slipping. The engine roared to life. As I peeled out of the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of movement in my rearview mirror. The car with the headlights on pulled out behind me. It followed for nearly a mile, staying just far enough back that I couldn't see the driver. Then, without warning, it turned off onto a side road and disappeared into darkness. I didn't slow down until I reached the highway. I drove straight through the night, exhaustion, forgotten fear keeping me awake until dawn. I never told my parents why I arrived early, pale and shaking. Weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched for the motel online. It didn't exist. The address led to an empty lot. No reviews, no photos, no record it had ever been there. The only thing I still have is a text message I never deleted. It's the last one I received that night, timestamped just minutes after I left. Next time, don't stop. I was driving alone on New Year's Eve when this happened, heading back home after visiting a friend in another state. I'd left later than I should have, and by the time the sun fully disappeared, I was already exhausted. The highway stretched endlessly ahead of me, dark asphalt, cutting through miles of forest and farmland. Traffic thinned out quickly as the night went on. By 10 p.m., it felt like I was the only person left on the road. My phone battery was low, and the signal kept dropping in and out. I told myself I'd drive another hour, then stop. I didn't make it that far. Around 1040, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Cars pass all the time. But these headlights stayed. Same distance, same lane. No attempt to overtake me, even when the road opened up. I changed lanes. They changed lanes. I slowed down slightly. They slowed too. My pulse quickened. I told myself not to panic. Maybe they were just cautious drivers. Maybe they were tired too. Still, when I took an exit on Impulse 1 my GPS hadn't suggested and saw the headlights follow me off the highway, my stomach dropped. The exit led to a narrow road lined with trees. No streetlights. Just my headlights cutting through darkness. A few minutes in, a sign appeared. Motel vacancy. The same kind of flickering neon I'd seen 100 times before. I hesitated, glancing in my mirror. The car behind me slowed, then continued past, disappearing into the dark. Relief washed over me, but it didn't last. I pulled into the motel parking lot anyway. I was too tired to keep going. The motel sat alone, far from anything else. One long building, one office, no restaurant, no gas station, just darkness beyond the parking lot. There were only 2 other cars parked there, both old and unremarkable. No one sat inside them. The exterior lights buzzed faintly, several burned out completely. I parked near the office and sat there for a moment, engine running, watching the road. No headlights returned. I turned the car off and stepped out, the night air sharp against my skin. The office door was unlocked. Inside, the lights were on, but no one stood behind the counter. A small radio played softly somewhere in the back. I waited. "Hello," I called. No answer. After a few seconds, a woman appeared from a side room. She looked tired, older than me by at least 20 years, her hair pulled back loosely. She didn't smile. She didn't ask how my drive was. She just looked at me like she wanted the interaction to end as quickly as possible. "One night," I said. She nodded and handed me a key attached to a faded plastic tag. "Room 7, she said. Her voice was flat. I asked if there was anyone else staying there. She hesitated just a little too long before answering. "A few." I thanked her and stepped back outside. As I walked toward room 7, I noticed something odd. The curtains in my room were already closed. That shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. Most motel rooms leave them partially open. I unlocked the door and stepped inside immediately, flipping the light switch. The room lit up slowly, the bulb flickering before settling. The air smelled stale, like the room hadn't been aired out in a while. I locked the door behind me and slid the deadbolt into place. Then I froze. The bed looked disturbed. Not messy exactly, but wrong. The blanket was pulled down slightly, the pillow dented in the center like someone had rested their head there recently. I stood still, listening. No sound. The bathroom light was off. The closet door was closed. I told myself housekeeping must have done a sloppy job. Still, I checked the bathroom, then the closet, both empty. I sat on the edge of the bed, my nerves buzzing. I plugged my phone into the wall. No service. I texted a friend anyway, telling her where I was stopping. The message didn't send. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, trying to relax. That's when I heard the footsteps. Outside, slow steps moving past my door, then stopping. I held my breath. A shadow passed beneath the doorframe. Someone stood there for a moment. Then the footsteps continued down the walkway. I exhaled shakily. A few minutes later, there was a knock. Soft, careful. I didn't answer. Housekeeping, a man's voice said quietly. My heart jumped. It was late. Too late. Tomorrow, I said, forcing my voice steady. Silence. Then, just need to check something. The voice replied. I stayed silent. The doorknob turned slightly. Just enough to test it. The deadbolt held. The handle stopped moving. The footsteps retreated. I sat there, shaking every instinct, screaming that I shouldn't have stopped. My phone buzzed suddenly, making me gasp. A notification appeared despite having no service. It was a text from an unknown number. Just one line. You were followed here. I stared at the message until my screen dimmed. You were followed here. The words felt heavier than they should have, like they were pressing into my chest. I hadn't told anyone where I was stopping. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't even been sure myself until the last moment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then I locked the phone and set it face down on the nightstand. I told myself not to respond. Whoever it was wanted a reaction. I lay back on the bed, fully dressed, shoes still on, eyes fixed on the door. The room felt smaller, now the walls closer. Every sound seemed amplified. The hum of the heater, the faint buzz of the exterior lights, the distant rush of cars on the highway. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. My breathing slowly steadied. I almost convinced myself the message was a prank, maybe someone guessing. Then, there was another knock, louder this time. Not gentle, not polite. 3 firm knocks in quick succession. I sat up instantly, heart racing. Front desk, a man's voice said from the other side. It wasn't the woman from earlier. This voice was lower, rougher. We need to verify your ID. I didn't answer. The handle turned sharply, harder than before, then stopped when it hit the deadbolt. Silence followed. I waited, muscles tense, expecting anger, shouting something. Instead, the voice came again, calmer now. Ma'am, we've had reports of suspicious activity. Please open the door. My throat tightened. Call the police, I said. I will. There was a pause. Then a soft laugh, barely audible. There's no need for that. Footsteps moved away, slow and unhurried. I didn't relax. I grabbed my bag and checked the window. The parking lot looked the same, but something felt off. One of the cars was closer, now parked directly across from my room. I was sure it hadn't been there before. The engine was off, but I could see the faint glow of a dashboard light inside. Someone was sitting in it, watching. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. He's impatient. I felt dizzy. I typed back before I could stop myself. Who is this? The reply came almost immediately. Someone who told you not to stop. A chill ran through me. I glanced at the door again. The deadbolt was still engaged. The chair was wedged under the handle. I told myself I could wait it out. Morning would come. Other guests would wake up. The motel wouldn't feel so isolated then. I lay back down, but sleep never came. Instead, the noises started. Soft at first. Footsteps outside my room, pacing back and forth. A cough. A murmur of voices just out of range, like people talking quietly on purpose. At one point, I heard a car door open and close. Another time, the sound of gravel crunching right outside my window. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. Around what must have been midnight, there was a sudden knock at the window. Hard. I screamed, despite myself scrambling backward off the bed. The curtain shifted slightly, as if someone had brushed against it. Open the door, a voice said softly from outside. I didn't answer. We know you're awake, the voice continued. You checked your phone. I pressed my back against the wall, tears streaming down my face. The voice sighed, almost bored. You really should have kept driving. The footsteps moved away again. I waited, shaking until my legs went numb. I didn't know how long passed before I heard the office door slam somewhere down the walkway. A car engine roared to life. I peered through a crack in the curtain. The car across from me pulled out of the lot, headlights sweeping across the building as it drove toward the highway. Relief hit me, so suddenly, I almost collapsed. I didn't waste the moment. I grabbed my bag, unlocked the door, and ran. I didn't go to the office. I didn't look around. I got into my car and locked the doors, my hands shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice. The engine started on the third try. As I pulled out, I saw movement near the office. The woman from the desk stood outside now, watching me leave. Her expression was unreadable. She didn't wave. She didn't try to stop me. She just watched until I turned onto the road and disappeared into the dark. I drove for hours, not stopping until sunrise. I didn't tell anyone what happened that night, not fully. Weeks later, curiosity gnawed at me. I searched for the motel online. There were a few reviews, all of them recent, all of them strange. One mentioned a man knocking on doors late at night. Another talked about being followed from the highway. One review simply said, "If you're alone, don't stay here." The motel shut down less than a month later. No explanation, no news coverage, just gone. Sometimes when I drive at night and see a flickering vacancy sign in the distance, I think about how close I came to never leaving that parking lot. And every eve, when the roads are quiet and the exits feel farther apart, I remember the message that came through with no signal at all. You were followed here. I was 32 when this happened, and it took place on Christmas Eve during a drive I had done dozens of times before. I worked in sales, and traveling alone at night wasn't unusual for me, but that trip felt wrong from the beginning. I'd finished a late meeting and decided to head home instead of staying another night. It was supposed to be a straight shot down the highway, 4 hours if traffic stayed light. By the time I realized how tired I was, the road signs were already blurring together. My eyes burned. My shoulders ached from gripping the wheel too long. When my GPS suggested a stop 20 minutes ahead, I didn't argue. The exit led to a stretch of road that felt forgotten, with no streetlights and trees pressed close on both sides. The motel appeared suddenly. Its sign half lit the word vacancy, glowing weakly in red. I almost drove past it. Something about the place made my stomach tighten, but exhaustion won. I pulled in. There were only 3 cars in the lot, all parked far apart. None of them looked recently arrived. The building was shaped like a long L, with the office tucked into the corner. One security camera hung above the office door, its small red light glowing steadily. I noticed it immediately. I don't know why. I parked near the office and sat there for a moment, engine running, watching the camera. It didn't move. It didn't swivel, just stared down at the lot like an unblinking eye. Inside the office, the lights were on, but no one stood at the desk. I rang the bell. The sound echoed. I waited. After a moment, a man appeared from a back room. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark circles under his eyes. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Checking in?" he asked. I nodded. He took my ID, typed something into the computer, and slid a key across the counter. "Room 9, he said. I asked how late the office stayed open. "All night," he replied. I glanced back at the camera above the door. "Does that record?" I asked casually. His smile tightened just a little. "Sometimes," he said. That answer bothered me more than it should have. I walked to room 9, my footsteps loud against the concrete. The exterior lights flickered as I passed beneath them. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the room felt colder than it should have. The heater was off. I turned it on and set my bag down, then locked the door behind me. The room looked normal enough. Bed neatly made, curtains half open, bathroom light off. I dropped onto the bed and exhaled deeply, letting the quiet wash over me. That's when I noticed the small black box mounted above the TV. It looked like a router or a cable unit, but a tiny green light blinked steadily on its front. I stood up and leaned closer. It wasn't connected to the TV. A thin wire ran from it into the wall. My skin prickled. I told myself it was nothing. Motel equipment, old security system. Still, I unplugged it. The green light stayed on. I unplugged it again, more firmly this time. Nothing changed. The light continued blinking. I stepped back, my heart beginning to race. My phone buzzed, startling me. No service bars, but a notification came through anyway. Camera reconnecting. I stared at the screen. I hadn't opened any app. I didn't have any motel-related apps installed. Another notification appeared. Camera online. My mouth went dry. I checked my phone's settings, scrolling frantically. Nothing looked out of place. No unfamiliar apps. No active connections. I locked the phone and set it down, my hands shaking. That's when I heard movement outside. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. They stopped right outside my door. I froze, listening. A shadow passed beneath the doorframe. Someone stood there for several seconds. Then the footsteps moved away. I waited, heart pounding, until the silence returned. I tried calling a friend, but the call failed. No signal. I went to the window and peeked through the curtain. The parking lot looked unchanged, but I could see the security camera above the office turning now, slowly sweeping the lot from left to right. It hadn't moved before. It was moving now, and it stopped, pointed directly at my room. My phone buzzed again. A message appeared from an unknown number. Please don't unplug the equipment. My knees went weak. I typed back without thinking. Who is this? The reply came almost instantly. We need to make sure you're safe. I backed away from the window, my pulse roaring in my ears. I didn't agree to being recorded, I typed. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. You checked in alone. The response finally came. That's when the cameras turn on. I locked the phone and sat on the edge of the bed, every instinct screaming that I had made a mistake. I grabbed my bag, considering leaving right then, but another sound stopped me. A soft knock at the door. Not loud, not aggressive, careful. Front desk, the man's voice called softly. We need to fix something in your room. I didn't answer. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. The knock came again, firmer this time. Miss, he said. It'll only take a minute. I stared at the door, my breath shallow, knowing with sick certainty that whatever had started that night wasn't finished, and I hadn't even been there an hour. I didn't answer the door. I sat perfectly still on the edge of the bed, listening to my own breathing and the faint hum of the heater kicking on and off. The knock came again, firmer, now followed by the soft scrape of a key brushing against metal, not turning, just touching, like a reminder that he had one. Miss, the man said again, his voice calm, practiced. The camera needs to be reset. My stomach dropped. I stared at the black strip beneath the door, half expecting to see light spill through if it opened. Instead, there was only silence. The footsteps moved away, slowly, unhurried, as if he knew exactly where I was and how little time I had. My phone buzzed on the bed beside me. Another notification, maintenance complete. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't opened the door. I picked up the phone, my hands shaking, and saw a live feed open automatically. It took me a second to understand what I was seeing. It was my room. The angle was high, tilted slightly downward. The camera was mounted somewhere near the ceiling, just out of my line of sight. I could see the bed, the door, the window, and myself sitting there frozen, staring at the screen. I gasped and spun around, scanning the ceiling. In the corner above the wardrobe, tucked into the shadow, where the wall met the ceiling, was a small black dome I hadn't noticed before. The green light was gone. The lens glinted faintly. My phone buzzed again. It helps us keep guests safe. I felt sick. Turn it off, I typed. I'm leaving. The response came slower this time. That wouldn't be wise. The footsteps returned outside, heavier now. Another knock, louder. We just need you to stay put, the man called through the door. There's been activity in the lot. I grabbed my bag and slipped my shoes back on, heart pounding. I moved quietly to the window and peeked through the curtain. The parking lot was almost empty, but one car sat idling near the office, headlights off. A second figure stood near it, a silhouette barely visible against the dark. The security camera above the office door slowly turned again, then stopped, aimed directly at my window. My phone buzzed. You see it too, the message read. Panic surged. I yanked the curtain closed and backed away. I'm calling the police, I typed, even though I knew there was no signal. The reply came immediately. They won't get here in time. The handle rattled sharply. This time there was pressure behind it. The deadbolt held, but the door shook slightly. I screamed, my voice raw, and the pressure stopped. Silence followed, thick and heavy. Then the camera feed on my phone zoomed in slowly, deliberately, until my face filled the screen. My eyes looked wild, afraid. Please don't make this difficult. A new message appeared. You're alone. Something snapped inside me. I grabbed the chair from the small table and wedged it hard under the handle, pushing with all my weight until it jammed. The handle rattled again, then stopped completely. Footsteps retreated faster now. I didn't wait. I flung the window open and climbed out, scraping my knee on the sill as I dropped onto the gravel below. Pain flared, but adrenaline drowned it out. I ran hunched low toward my car. The gravel crunched loudly under my feet. I heard shouting behind me. A door slammed. "Stop!" someone yelled. I didn't. I reached my car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside, locking it immediately. My hands shook so badly I dropped the keys once, twice before the engine finally roared to life. Headlights flooded the lot as I peeled away, tires squealing. In the rearview mirror, I saw 2 figures standing near my room. One of them raised an arm, holding something up to their face. A phone. Recording. I didn't slow down until the motel disappeared behind me. I drove until dawn, until the sky lightened and the road filled with other cars. I didn't stop. I didn't answer my phone when it buzzed again and again with notifications I refused to look at. When I finally reached home, I sat in my driveway, shaking, afraid to get out. I didn't sleep for a full day after that. A week later, I checked my phone's storage. There was a video saved I didn't remember recording. The timestamp was from that night while I was still in the room. I almost deleted it without watching, but something made me press play. The footage showed my motel room from that same high angle. It showed me sitting on the bed, staring at my phone. Then it showed the door opening quietly, the chair shifting just enough to allow it. A man stepped inside. He stood there for a moment watching me. Then he reached up and adjusted the camera. The video ended. I reported everything to the police. They investigated the address. The motel had closed months earlier. The building was abandoned. The cameras had been removed years ago. There was no record of a man working the desk, no record of my stay. But sometimes late at night, when my phone lights up for no reason at all, I remember the last message I received before I finally turned it off. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. You checked in alone.